All right, so we're going to go ahead and go through worksheet 24 real quick. I apologize for my sick voice in advance. I know it's not going to be very pleasant on the ears, but that's okay. We're going to make it through either way. So we should have gone through number 1 in class together, but in case you weren't here or in case you didn't get it down, we'll just start with number 1. So Mark drives Uber and charges a flat rate of $3 for pickup. My first number, I'm going to box that up, flat rate of $3. Plus $1 per mile driven. That's going to be my second number. Remember, you're always going to get 2 numbers in these word problems. One of those numbers is your M. One of those numbers is your B. We'll figure out which one is which in a second. So identify M and B. Describe what X and Y represent. Then write the equation and answer the questions. So we've got 3 and we've got 1. Those are my 2 numbers. So we got a 50-50 shot of guessing which one is going to be which. But it's going to be pretty easy for us to tell, right? Our B value is always the starting amount. In our notes, we called it the initial value, right? So that's going to be the thing that you only pay for once. So I'm going to write one time. So if let's say you order an Uber, Mark picks up the job, he's going to come pick you up. Right off the bat, before you even get in the car, you got to pay $3 just to get picked up. Now, you're not paying $3 every single mile that you're driven. $3 is a one-time payment, so that's going to be our B, or our starting amount. Now, once you get in the Uber and you start driving, you're going to be paying $1 per mile driven. Whenever we see that word per, we know that that's going to be our M, because it's happening over and over and over again. So M is whatever we're going to be paying over and over, which in this case is going to be $1. So if we write the equation, y is equal to mx plus b, my m is 1, x plus my b is 3, and boom, that's our equation right there. Now remember, this equation represents a function of the number of miles driven that gives us the total cost of the ride, right? So if we want to know what X represents, we have to look at the units of our slope. Our slope is $1 per mile driven, so X is going to represent the number of miles driven, not the price, right? We'll get to the price in a second. But X represents the number of miles, right? So an actual quantity of miles that you're driven in this Uber. Y is always, I don't want to say always, but 99 times out of 100, Y is going to represent the total amount. And in this case, we're talking about an Uber ride. So Y represents the total amount, let's say, paid for a ride, right? So if we want to figure out what this equation represents, Y is our total amount that we have to pay. We're going to pay $1 for every mile driven, so X is my number of miles driven, plus that $3 initial pickup fee that we only have to pay for once. Right, so we can plug in any number for X that represents the miles driven and solve it out to get the total amount paid. That's our Y. So let's do that in step C. How much would a ride with Mark cost? Right away, how much would a ride? That's going to be my Y. If you need to go 10 miles, X is my number of miles driven. So 10 miles is going to be representative of my X. So we don't know what Y is. How much would a ride cost? We don't know the total amount paid, or the total cost, we could say. I'm just going to write that in, total cost. We don't know what the total cost is. We know what the number of miles driven is. So we're going to plug in that 10 for X. Bring down our equation. Y is equal to 1 times X, which in this case is 10 miles driven, plus our initial pickup fee of $3. We're going to multiply 1 times 10 to get 10. 1 times 10 is 10. And then we're going to add 10 plus 3 to get 13. So y is equal to 13. That's what we find out. But we have to remember to include our units. So in this case, y, like we said, represents the total amount paid. So I saw some people write 13 miles. No, we only went 10 miles. But to go those 10 miles, it's going to cost us a total cost of $13. And that answers our question. How much would a ride with Mark cost? $13 if we needed to go 10 miles. So you're given your x. You have to find what y is equal to. And that's pretty much how each of these problems is going to go. Now, sometimes you're going to be given a y, and you have to find the x. We'll get to that in number 2. So a 10-mile ride is going to cost me $13. How much would a ride, again, we don't know the total cost. How much would a ride with Mark cost if you need to go 22 miles? We know my x is going to be 22 because if we're given the number of miles, x represents my number of miles. So we'll follow the same process that we did in step C. But instead of plugging in 10, we're going to plug in 22. 1 times 22, that's just 22. So 22 miles, $22 to go 22 miles, plus the $3 to get picked up in the first place, gives us 25. And again, our units on 25 in this case are going to be dollars because we're asked to find the total cost of a 22-mile ride in Mark's Uber. All right. That's a little bit confusing. If you have any questions about that, feel free to go back, rewind, and take a look at what we did. Right? The benefit of having these videos is so that you can review. When we're in class, it's one of those things where I say something once and you kind of have to get it, or at least ask a question to fully understand it. But with a video, you can rewind, watch something over again, and get a better understanding. Down to number 2. Liliana owns an Etsy shop making hand-crocheted stuffed animals for her customers. She charges a $7 base price for her materials, plus an additional $12 per stuffed animal order. There's that word per again. So I know that 12.5 right away is going to be my M. Anytime we see per, we know that's going to be our M. Because again, M is what we're paying over and over. If you only want one stuffed animal, you're paying $12.50. If you want 2, you'll pay twice that. If you want 3, you'll pay 3 times that amount, over and over and over again, depending on the number of stuffed animals you order. So if 12.5 is my M, 7.0, right, a base price of $7 for her materials, that's going to be my B. We could just call that 7. We don't need the 0.00. So it doesn't matter how many stuffed animals you order, you're paying $7 just for the materials to start out, plus an additional $12.50 per stuffed animal. So we can write the equation, y is equal to 12.5. We can drop 0, x plus 7. And this is our function, where once again, y is the total cost of your order. And if we want to know what x represents, again, we look at the units of our slope, $12.50 per stuffed animal. So x is not going to be a dollar amount. X is going to be the number of stuffed animals ordered. We could just say the number of stuffed animals. So this equation represents a function of the total cost of your order based on the number of stuffed animals that you purchase, right? So Y is your total cost. You're paying $12.50 per stuffed animal. X is my number of stuffed animals. So however many animals you order, you multiply that by 12.5. Like I said, if you get 2 stuffed animals, you're paying 2 times $12.50. 3 stuffed animals, 3 times $12.50. Plus that initial value of $7. You're not paying $7 worth of material cost for each stuffed animal. It is a base price, right? So you only pay that $7 once. The repeating number over and over again is the cost per stuffed animal. So we've got our equation. We figured out what X is. We figured out what Y is. Now let's answer these questions. How much would it cost? Again, total cost is Y. So we don't know what Y is. How much would it cost if you wanted 3 crocheted stuffed animals? Total cost is my Y. The number of stuffed animals is my X, just like we identified in step B. So we're going to rewrite our equation. Again, we don't know what Y is. We know that the repeating number is $12.50. And in this specific case, we want 3 stuffed animals. So X being the number of stuffed animals, my X is going to be 3. Oops. There it is. Plus that base price of $7 for materials. Now we can solve it out. Whatever number we get on the right-hand side is going to equal Y, which represents my total cost of the order. 12.5 times 3. Let me get my calculator just to be sure here. 12.5 times 3 is $37.50. Oops, let me write. Y is equal to 37.5 plus that $7 initial fee. So we'll add 7. And my total cost here, Y is equal to 44.5. Now again, we need our units. It's either going to be 44.5 stuffed animals or $44.5. We solved for Y, and Y represents the total cost. So my total cost of a 3 stuffed animal order, including the material base price fee, it's going to be $44.50. That's my answer for part C. Step D is a little bit different. Step D says, how many stuffed animals could you order if you have $60 to spend? So we're going to kind of reverse the roles here in D. How many stuffed animals? We don't know how many stuffed animals, and the number of stuffed animals is represented by the variable X. Could you order if you have $60? So you've got $60 to spend. That's going to be represented by our total cost. So $60 is my Y. Now this is where we had some confusion in class, so we'll take it slow. If we have the equation here, we're going to plug $60 in. But unlike in part C, when we plugged in 3 animals for X, we're going to plug in $60 for Y this time around. So 60 is equal to 12.5x plus 7. Remember, the question's asking, how many stuffed animals could you order? We've already determined that X represents the number of stuffed animals. So if we don't know how many stuffed animals you could order with this amount of money, X is going to stay as X. So now we have to solve for X by getting it all by itself. If you remember our two-step equations from Math 7, hopefully we do. We want to get x all by itself. We're going to peel these layers off, starting with the plus 7. We'll do the opposite of plus 7, which is minus 7. But remember, equations are like scales. We have to keep them balanced. So if we minus 7 on the right, we have to minus 7 on the left as well. Right? Let's simplify this. 7 minus 7 cancels out, leaving us with 12.5x on the right, and 60 minus 7 gives us 53. I'm going to bring this equation up here. 53 is equal to 12.5x. So we peeled back one of the layers of our x. Now we have to do the opposite of this. So if we have 12.5x, our brains are going to tell us, oh, subtract 12.5 from both sides. But we have to do the inverse operation. 12.5 right next to this x means that we are multiplying those two numbers together. So the opposite of multiplying would be dividing by 12.5 on both sides. 12.5 divided by 12.5 is just 1, so we can cross those out, leaving us with x all by itself, right? 1x is the same as x. And 53 divided by 12.5 gives me 4.24. Now this is where we have to think a little bit more logically. As we noted, x represents the number of stuffed animals you could order. So in theory, our answer here would be, oh, we can order 4.24 stuffed animals. But you can't order 0.24 of a stuffed animal. That would be like a half-finished product. No one's going to sell that. So logically, we have to round down. We can order 4 stuffed animals at the most. We'll have a little bit of our $60 left over, right? Because 4 stuffed animals, if we plugged that back in here for x, 12.5 times 4 is 50, plus that initial value of 7 means that this order would only cost us $57. So you may be thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. We have $60, but we only spent $57. Well, we're not always going to get an exact number here, right? Whenever we're dealing with a situation like this, it's a real-life context. So we have to think logically. The most amount of stuffed animals we could order with this amount of money, without going over this amount of money, Price is Right rules, for any of you that watch Price is Right, is 4 stuffed animals. We can't order 5 stuffed animals because 5 times 12.5 plus 7 would be 69.5. We don't have $69.5. We only have 60. So even though we're not going to spend that entire $60, the most amount of stuffed animals we could order would be 4. All right? So that's number 1 and 2. I'm going to break this up into 2 separate videos. So once you get done with this, everything makes sense. Go ahead and access the next video for numbers 3 and 4.